Okay, so this month the video is just going to be kind of a wrap up of what we learned this year. And in this wrap up, you're going to see that we talked about a lot of things, and some things that maybe you have forgotten or you put on the back burner. So this will hopefully be a nice little reminder of everything you've learned, and it might spark you to go try something that maybe you didn't dive into very much. So first I want to just say, the outline of MILI, it's been this way since the beginning, that we follow kind of the 3 R's: research, reliable resources, and responsible use. So we start by talking to you about research, tools, and tricks. And then we move into reliable resources, and that includes copyright. And then we end with responsible use of the things that you've been learning about. So that's why we get to presentations later. And the reason we have presentations later, we always have teachers say this should have been the first thing. It can't be the first thing. Presentations have to be at the end because we need to talk about research first. How do you find things to put into your presentation? Then we have to talk about reliable resources, including copyright, so that you know when we say you need Creative Commons images in your presentations, you know what that means. So you have to have those 2 pieces first before you can even think of diving into presentations. So that's why we have it kind of set up the way we do, that we talk about research, we talk about copyright, and then we give you tools that you can use responsibly. So, starting way back in August was our first kind of introduction to MILI for you. So we got you into the MILI Wiki, we got you to the MILI Ning, we got you blogging, but we also talked to you about strong passwords. So do you remember some of the tips to make strong passwords? To write a whole sentence but only use the first letter of each word, to throw in some letters, to throw in some symbols. So we talked about making strong passwords way back when. And I also talked to you about iPad tips and tricks. So do you still remember how to make your keyboard split in half on the iPad? Do you know how to take a screenshot? We talked about all those things way back in August. And these presentations that we showed you way back in August, they are still in the MILI Wiki, so you can access them at any time if you need a refresher. Then we hit September, and in September we showed you a lot of things. That was our Research Ready month. So in that month we talked to you about things like the Research Project Calculator, the RPC there in the top left-hand corner. The Research Project Calculator is where you could have students get their research projects broken down into different steps, so it might help them along the way. We also talked to you about the art evaluation of assignments, where you can analyze whether your assignment is authentic, does it facilitate the research process, and is it supported by the teacher. So if you are making a research project, I suggest just checking out one more time that art evaluation of assignments to try to see if you have research really well in your assignment. And then we also showed you things like the Dribbling Lessons Wiki. That's in the bottom left-hand corner. The Dribbling Lessons Wiki kind of goes with the RPC, in that it gives you information literacy lessons by different subject areas and information literacy lessons by the different steps from the Research Project Calculator. So you might want to visit some of those to try to find some lesson plans by subject, or lesson plans to help students understand the research process. And then we also talked about plagiarism proofing assignments, and that's where you got all those LPPs, the low probability of plagiarism assignments. So if you're making an assignment again, you might want to just revisit that and just see if any of those LPPs can kind of help you when you're figuring out what your students will do for the assignment. In September, we also introduced you to the ELM databases. And I know some of you had experience with the ELM databases, especially the media specialists, but for some of you they were brand new. So we also gave you the Database Exploration Checklist, which is just a little checklist to help you explore the databases and see what's there. So if you need more help with the ELM databases, and if you want that exploration checklist again, it's still in the wiki underneath September. We also talked about a couple tools that are available throughout the state of Minnesota. Well, I should say Ask Min is throughout the state of Minnesota, but Homework Rescue is just for the libraries in the Twin Cities. So we didn't show these very much when we met, but we told you about them. And Ask Min is where you can talk to a librarian 24/7, and it's chatting with a librarian online. So definitely recommend that to your students if they're doing research projects. And then students in the Twin Cities Metro are really lucky to have Homework Rescue. Homework Rescue is through the public libraries in the Twin Cities, and it is online tutoring that's available for them. It's in English and Spanish, and it starts at 1 p.m. and it goes until 11 p.m. So that's definitely something that could be of value. This is tutoring, so this is where somebody could talk through a math problem with someone, or they could submit a paper and talk through the grammar in the paper. So it really is online tutoring. So Ask Min is where you have research help, and online tutoring is where you can get help per subject area. And in September, we also showed you the Google Custom Search. So Google Custom Search is where you can make your own little search engine, and it searches the websites that you want it to search. So if you're going to have students use a bunch of different websites for a research project, you might as well make a Google Custom Search for them. So don't forget about Google Custom Search, and this and all the other resources I mentioned for September are always going to be linked in the wiki under September. Now in October, we started talking about online productivity and RSS feeds. So we explained to you what RSS feeds were, and then we all used the tool Flipboard. Flipboard allows you to manage RSS feeds and to manage different websites that you like to follow in one easy location. So Flipboard is that kind of online magazine creator. Under October, we also gave you some suggestions for different things you could follow on Flipboard as well. So there's a long list of bloggers and people on Twitter and Twitter chats that you could follow via Flipboard. So if you need some advice, like when you leave MILI, we have people always say, how do I keep up with things? Flipboard could be one way to do that. So it's always going to be under October if you need more help getting started. In October, we also just kind of briefly talk to you about Pinterest and Bitly. Pinterest is where you can pin images that you find online, so it can kind of be a nice way to store things that you're finding. And then Bitly allows you to store links. And it's nice that you can store links in Bitly because then you can access them from anything that you're on that has internet capability. So you don't have to worry about having bookmarks in one browser on your work computer. If you save everything in Bitly, you can access them from anywhere. So we kind of just briefly went over those tools, but there is more information about them under October if you need help getting started. In November, we started talking about online collaboration. So we showed you how to use Google Sites, so you could make your own website, or your students could make their own website. And we started talking about KidBlog, where you could have a blogging website for all of your students in your class. So I know some of you keep telling me about your kid blogs, so I think that's good. Some of you were really successful with that. If you want more info on those things, it's always going to be back under November. November is where I also shared with you a couple different Google sites that I made that had different apps on them from all different subject areas. So if you are still looking for some apps by different subject areas, go to November in the wiki and check out either MILI Junior iPad apps or MILI iPad apps, and you're bound to find some suggestions there. Now in December, it wasn't me talking at you, but we had guest speakers come in. So we had guest speakers come in from Minitex, which is the organization that maintains the electronic library for Minnesota. So they came and talked to us about some advanced things about the databases. So we kind of hit you twice with the databases, but at the beginning we didn't talk about them in any kind of depth. So I hope when they came in December you got even more information about the electronic library for Minnesota. And then January, we had a snow day. Now we go to a couple different districts for MILI, and in each district we had a snow day in January. So January was kind of a month where we had off, but it wasn't an extremely nice month to have off. But we had a snow day in January. We didn't see you again till February. But we did do our January makeup at some point. This occurred in different months in the different districts we go to, but we did eventually get to copyright in the Creative Commons. So don't forget about that MILI copyright wiki that we created for you. It has copyright resources, some teaching tools and lesson plans, but the best website, my favorite kind of page of that, is the copyright friendly materials page. On that page you will find, I think it's over 50 resources where you can get images and audio and music and pictures that are in the Creative Commons or that are freely available for you to use in some way. Read the information on each site to determine how you can use the images and things, but it's a great collection we put together of places you can go to try to get materials that you don't have to worry about when you're using them. We also played Copyright Jeopardy! And I used a tool called BYO Jeopardy! To play that. And you can just Google BYO Jeopardy! And you'll find it, because it's not a very, it's a kind of a long link for BYO Jeopardy! But just Google it and you'll find it. And that's where you can create an account. And they're free accounts, and you can store as many Jeopardy! Boards as you'd like there. And what's nice is they let you copy Jeopardy! Boards. So if you made one year, but you want to edit it, you can just copy it. You can either edit that one board you already made, or you can copy it and make a second copy of it and edit away. So it's kind of a nice tool to be able to do that. And then don't forget about the Creative Commons. If that's one big thing you take away, or if you take away one big thing, I hope it's the Creative Commons and that you know what that means. You want to look for those items that are in the Creative Commons when you're searching online so that you know you can use them without issue. So if you need to review some of these things, go under January in the MILI Wiki, and then also check out that MILI Copyright Wiki as well. So then when we did meet in February, we talked about some back-channeling tools. So we talked about things like Today's Meet and Simple Meet. And we even have a little chat rubric. I have a couple chat rubrics linked underneath February that you can look at if you did decide to integrate chat. So we talked about the back channel, and we talked about some note-taking tools too, but we didn't quite get to them when we had so much else to kind of throw in. We weren't able to talk about some note-taking tools, or at least I should say we weren't able to show you those note-taking tools other than via the video. But we went over that in February, and even in the Brooklyn Center District we even went over Twitter. Twitter's not blocked up there. So in Brooklyn Center they even got additional information about how to use Twitter in this same way. But for those of you who don't have Twitter available, Today's Meet is a good alternative for you. Oh, and I did have a screen set up with some of these note-taking tools. These were in February. I just mentioned in the video I talked about Dragon Dictation and Paperport Notes, but then I also put links to all these other tools underneath February as well that you might want to check out. MindMeister is where you can do mind mapping. Evernote is a really large note-taking suite, much bigger than Paperport Notes. Edmodo is where you can make your own little social network for your classroom. It looks very much like Facebook, so students are kind of used to how it works. But you can have your own social network for your classroom where you can post things, you can have a calendar. It works great when you can kind of do back-channel talking in there too. And then of course there's Twitter. And Twitter is blocked in some districts we go to, so not all of you can access that from school. But Twitter is a great way to do back-channel talking as well as to follow other teachers and stay on top of current events. Well, in March we talked about screencasting, and that's where we talked about EduCreations. So you learned all about EduCreations and how that tool works. And so I hope some of you have created some screencasts and can find some value in it. Up in Brooklyn Center, we also talked about Screencast-O-Matic, which is the tool I use to record all of these presentations. And it only works on a computer, not on iPads at all. So you have to have a computer to use Screencast-O-Matic. But if you ever want to record your computer screen, like I'm doing now, Screencast-O-Matic could be one to check out as well. But EduCreations is a great iPad app that gives you that whiteboard screen where you can try to record. In April, we talked about presentation tools. So you learned all about Animoto and AudioBoo. Animoto is that great tool that makes you look really impressive. You just give it pictures and it turns it into kind of beautiful presentations. And then AudioBoo is that slick tool that can have you record up to 3 minutes of audio. I also mentioned a few other presentation tools in April that you might want to check out on your own, like Haiku Deck, Prezi, and Sketch. Haiku Deck also makes you look pretty impressive. You just give it the text and it finds beautiful images to add to the background of your presentation. Prezi is the tool that kind of zooms around. It just gives you a big whiteboard. You throw up everything on the whiteboard that you want to talk about, and then you tell Prezi what things to go to. So you do make a path between all the things on your whiteboard, but people really like it. It's kind of a jazzy way to jazz up your presentations. And then Sketch is where you can kind of annotate and add things to images. So that could be a fun one to explore too. Now I want you to know that the MILI Wiki will always remain. We will never delete the pages that we make for your district. So what you want to do is save the link to the home page for your district page. So if you were in Brooklyn Center, you'd go to this Brooklyn Center page and save that URL, because that will never change. You know, the very home page of the wiki right now gives links to Brooklyn Center, MPS MILI, and MPS MILI Junior. And that home page will change because we'll add different districts and work with different people. But these pages, if you go right to this home page here, if you go right to the Brooklyn Center page or right to the MPS MILI page, those pages will never change. The URL will always remain the same. So you just want to copy that link. That's the link that you want to save, because we're never going to change all of the information that we have for you. You can always go back to October, back to January, and you can view that information again. So this will always be there. We won't continue to edit the pages. So if you find a dead link a couple years from now, we're not going to be editing that link. So keep that in mind. But these pages will always remain, so you can always go back and review this information, because we know we shared a lot with you, and we know you probably didn't have as much time to try all of it as maybe you would like. So you can always go back to this page or the page for your school, and you can review this information at any time. So that's it for May. That gives you kind of a quick overview of stuff we went over. And I know we talked about some other things when we met too, but the basics of what we went over was just here in this presentation. So I hope you kind of realize that we did, share with you a lot of information, and you did absorb a lot of information this year. So when we meet, it's all you though. We won't really be talking much at you. We're just going to be listening to your presentations. So make sure you finish your presentation before we meet, and use one of the tools we talked about in MILI. We talked about Animoto, AudioBoo, EduCreations, but then we also mentioned Haiku Deck and Prezi, so feel free to use Haiku Deck or Prezi to create yours too. We didn't go over that with you, but if you want to use that to make it, that would be perfectly fine. So use one of the tools that we talked about in some way in MILI to create your presentation. And just remember, your presentation has to be what you learned in MILI that you either have already applied or that you want to apply in the future. So give us some information about what you liked and that you might continue to keep using. So that's all we have for this video, so we'll see you in May.